Under the lights of the second UzChess Cup 2025, a high-stakes encounter unfolded between two of the brightest young stars of modern chess. Representing Uzbekistan, Nodirbek Abdusattorov, rated 2694, took the white pieces. His challenger was Praggnanandhaa from India, boasting a rating of 2,734. These titans met in round 13 of the tournament, each vying to claim dominance in a tournament that gathers the world's most promising talents. The opening they chose was unconventional and sharp, the Konstantinopolsky variation of the King's Knight opening, a rare sideline that immediately signaled creativity and preparation. Abdusattorov, playing with white, opened the battle with a classical pawn to e4. The Indian prodigy, Praggnanandhaa, answered confidently with pawn to e5. Then white followed up with knight to f3, developing swiftly, and black mirrored with knight to c6. White struck with pawn to g3, indicating his intention to fianchetto the bishop, a key characteristic of the Konstantinopolsky. Black replied with knight to f6. The early middle game evolved quickly as Abdusattorov pushed pawn to d3, and Praggnanandhaa replied with a central pawn thrust to d5. White captured with pawn takes d5, and black quickly recovered the center with knight takes d5. Abdusattorov brought out his bishop to g2, preparing to castle, and black followed suit with bishop to d6. Both players castled, setting the stage for tactical fireworks. Abdusattorov launched pawn to a3, perhaps hinting at queenside intentions, and Pragg responded with rook to e8. Then came pawn to b4 from white, a sign of queenside aggression, and black retreated the knight back to f6. Abdusattorov developed his knight to d2 while Praggnanandhaa quietly played pawn to a6, preventing any immediate pressure on the b5 square. Bishop to b2 followed from Abdusattorov, putting pressure on the diagonal, and Praggnanandhaa responded with bishop to g4. Then white challenged it with pawn to h3, and black dropped back with bishop to f5. Abdusattorov, now sensing an opportunity, jumped with knight to g5, but this was an inaccuracy, the first small crack in the game. Praggnanandhaa calmly played queen to d7, increasing coordination, and Abdusattorov slid his king to h2. Black brought his rook to d8. Then, white played knight to e4, simplifying the position. Praggnanandhaa traded knights, knight takes e4, followed by knight takes e4 again from white. Black's reply, bishop to g6, repositioned the piece to either king's side. Abdusattorov played queen to d2, and black tucked the bishop away to f8, setting up a reroute. White doubled rooks with rook to e1, and Praggnanandhaa struck with knight to d4, creating pressure in the center. Abdusattorov responded with knight to c5, and black decided to capture, bishop takes c5. Then, white recaptured with pawn takes c5, and now came a tense moment. Praggnanandhaa played pawn to e4, an inaccuracy that began to shift the tide. Abdusattorov calmly centralized with queen to c3. Then came a terrible mistake. Praggnanandhaa played pawn takes d3, a clear blunder that let go of the advantage. But shockingly, white replied with pawn takes d3 instead of the more punishing alternative, another blunder. Despite this, the tension mounted as black played rook takes e1, white answered rook takes e1, and then Praggnanandhaa continued with pawn to f6. Abdusattorov captured with bishop takes b7, and black played knight to b5, another inaccuracy. The Indian was now starting to slip under pressure. Abdusattorov responded with queen to c4 check, and Pragg blocked with bishop to f7. Queen to b4 followed from white, a mistake, and Praggnanandhaa pounced with queen takes d3. White pushed pawn to a4, black continued with knight to d4. Rook to e3 came from white, and black answered with queen to d1. After bishop takes d4, rook took d4, and white played queen to a5. But then came a thunderous blunder from white. This queen move allowed a massive shift in evaluation. Black replied rook to d2, suddenly holding a strong grip. Now the game reached a pivotal moment. Abdusattorov played king to g2, but that too was a mistake. Then came Praggnanandhaa's move, queen to c2. But wait, a blunder. He missed the crushing continuation. Abdusattorov played rook to f3, but again, not the best. Black played pawn to h6, and finally white snapped up a pawn with queen takes c7. Black tried to rebuild with queen to b1, but that was another misstep. The game became chaos. White played rook to e3, black answered bishop to g6, another inaccuracy. Abdusattorov played bishop to f3, a blunder. He missed a chance to seal the game. Then black struck back with queen to c2. White checked with queen to b8. Black's king fled to h7, and white moved his king to safety with king to g1. Praggnanandhaa launched rook takes f2, stealing a pawn. But white held strong with queen to b3. Black answered queen to d2, then queen to a2, then queen to c2. The center was wild. Then white struck with pawn to c6. And suddenly, Pragg blundered again, rook to d2, instead of locking things down. Abdusattorov took over with queen takes c2, rook takes c2, and then he pushed his pawn with a5. A tidal wave was coming. Praggnanandhaa tried to fight back with pawn to h5, but Abdusattorov played rook to e7 and began breaking through. After bishop to f5 and pawn to c7, Pragg attempted to resist with rook to c5, but the momentum had shifted. Abdusattorov's passed pawn was too strong. Bishop to b7, bishop takes h3, bishop takes a6, rook takes a5, and finally pawn to c8 queen. The rook captured, but white's bishop recaptured on c8. The material advantage now belonged to Abdusattorov. The endgame was clinical. Rook to a2, bishop to e6, rook to b2, rook to c7. Slowly but surely, Abdusattorov tightened the grip. After rook to e2, bishop to f7, and black pushing pawn to g6, the walls were closing in. After many maneuvering moves, exchanges, and checks, white pushed through. Eventually, Praggnanandhaa ran out of resources. Abdusattorov crowned his victory after rook to c7, sealing the game. A triumph of endurance, precision, and courage under pressure. And so, Nodirbek Abdusattorov emerged victorious in a game filled with twists, blunders, and missed opportunities. A true roller coaster at the second UzChess Cup 2025, and a dramatic win worthy of remembrance. For more epic chess battles like this one, don't forget to follow the YouTube channel Chessy4E5.